Hello YouTube. Today I'm coming at you with a type of video that I haven't really been making in a while, and that is a response video. Now I usually like to stay away from these because the vast majority of this platform use it to oppose a type of viewpoint that they disagree with, and therefore it's often very negative for no reason. It's not constructive. So I always prefer to choose videos that I agree with to a great extent, with slight differences in opinion I want to share and points I want to further develop. And I had actually the great opportunity of coming across such a video yesterday, and therefore I have decided to make a quick video on the matter, a response per se. The video is a 7-minute long segment by Geoffrey, for the people who don't know him. I will put the video in the description. It is about body dysmorphia, and to me, it's an under-discussed topic on this platform, one that he tackled extremely well and rapidly too. So I encourage you to, one, check out the video, and two, subscribe to his channel if you haven't already. He makes good content for natural lifters, and he insists on points that I believe to be essential, such as programming, being patient, and resetting real natural standards that we can all abide by. And that's what he did with his video. He explained point by point why in reality body dysmorphia is caused to a great extent by steroid users, and I am in 100% agreement with everything he said. But since his video was short, I had certain points that I believed he made that were very interesting, and so I want to complete them because I myself have made two videos on the matter that you can also find in the description. One about the spiritual characteristics of body dysmorphia, and two, how to actually cure your body dysmorphia. Both of which explain to a great extent what it constitutes, so I will not be explaining that to you again today, because since Geoff, I will be calling him Geoff, this video was more about the cultural aspect of it and how it impacts the platform, I want to stay in the same vein. Plus, you know me, I cannot resist a good cultural segment. So, to go back on what he said and the points he made that I believe to be fascinating. One, he presents the idea that body dysmorphia or muscle dysmorphia isn't birthed in a vacuum. And that, to me, is evident. It is not the fruit of your imagination. It is not just the result of your existence only that created the body dysmorphia. It's the existence of others. As we say in French, l'enfer c'est les autres. Hell is other people. It's the same for that type of mental anguish. It cannot be created just by you. It is the comparison with others that makes it so, that makes it appear. So in reality, all of us, me included, who suffer from body dysmorphia, suffer from it because at some point or the other, we were infected by it by someone else. And that someone else was also infected by a person previously. We are all sharing the same type of disease, in a sense, within this community. And it is infectious. Infectious to the point that I believe it is one of the worst diseases that is being passed around YouTube Fitness, because for the most part it's underdiagnosed. As I said, no one discusses it, and it's underdiagnosed for a simple reason. The culprits are the big channels who clearly do not want to discuss that very topic. They would rather sweep it under the rug because they are to blame. But they are both the culprits and the victims because they themselves have body dysmorphia. Well, you will come to understand that. And the cycle is very easy to explain. Someone feels small because of their BDD, their body dysmorphia disorder, so they take drugs, and once they have taken drugs, they make everyone around them self-conscious because these people now feel smaller because you are only so big compared to the people around you in reality, or unless you have never met another human, we're always comparing the way we look at our physiques with others. And so this creates an inflation of physiques that happens at a local level in your local gym, but also at an international level on YouTube Fitness and social media as a platform. That was described very accurately by Geoff, who in reality is doing a sort of epidemiologic study on the matter. He has perfectly pinpointed where it came from and the way it propagates and infects people within the community. And this disease, the body dysmorphia disease, only really has two outcomes. Either it's going to stress you out, it's going to make you feel depressed, it's going to make you look at yourself and feel, man, I haven't gained any muscle, I'm small as hell, why am I even doing it? It's going to rob you from the joy of lifting weights in reality. Because since we want results so bad, if our brain tells us that there is no such thing as results, we end up giving up. Or for the people who break down and decide to just take steroids, it leads to death. It leads to the destruction of your organs, to an early death, to the loss of your hair, and at the end of the day, to the loss of the vitality that you thought you would be able to reclaim by using drugs. But steroids are not the key to body dysmorphia. If anything, steroids makes everything bigger, and that includes the body dysmorphia. So it's in reality a modern problem that was created by modern appliances. A point that Geoff made in passing, he didn't spend too much time on it, but that personally fascinated me because I never thought about that. Do you believe that people, even 30 years ago, had body dysmorphia to the level that we have? I don't think so. I think the levels have skyrocketed. Most everyone has body dysmorphia to an extent or another. Some people to a debilitating level. And it's not just muscle. I mean, dysmorphia across the board, be it body or gender, is widespread. Why is it so widespread? I believe it is because of the environment. The environment has an impact on us. It is making the problem much worse. We are being exposed to something that is triggering that mental illness. And it is only getting worse. You see that with bodybuilding, you see that with social media. As influencers, as competitors and athletes get bigger and bigger, the total global body dysmorphia also gets bigger because it is not birthed in a vacuum. It is based on the way people around you look. So if people around you look bigger and bigger, what happens to the dysmorphia? It gets bigger and bigger. But what if you can't catch up? What if you cannot match that insane pace of inflation of physiques? Well, what inflates is your mental anguish and the mental pain you feel. So you're stuck between a rock and a hard place. Do you want to just suffer from it? Or do you want to just bite the bullet, take steroids, and then suffer from it in the long run? Truly, it seems as if there were no way out, because it's not like you can just jump in a time machine and go back to days where people were smaller and didn't trigger your body dysmorphia as much. And as you get exposed to more of these physiques that grow constantly, you are also being made cognizant of the fact that you are a disappointment, that you are not up to par, that you're not up to the challenge. Because if you were to just look at your Instagram or YouTube fitness in general and look at the physiques, well, you would quickly realize that you are nowhere near that level and that realistically, you know deep down you will never be near that level. And since a lot of you guys look up to the people that you watch and follow, well, that is very discouraging because now you are being shown a physique, a standard that you are being told is not just the norm, but what you're supposed to achieve, but you perceive intuitively that you can never achieve it. This is what makes most people suffer from body dysmorphia. It's not just them. Body dysmorphia is not really a disease that is only just making yourself crumble inside. It's what you see outside that's causing that. It's the external factors that are truly dangerous in that case. And since the top influencers, especially on platforms that are very visual, like Instagram or TikTok, are always the one on drugs, well, these are the ones that get to the top, that get the most visibility, that then also encourage other people to follow their same practices to get to the top themselves. And I've personally discerned an interesting fact about body dysmorphia, something that, again, Geoff's video made me realize. I realized one thing. The more distance there is between you and the influencer that you regard as your hero or model, the worse the body dysmorphia gets. this is also why the physique inflation with bodybuilders and influencers getting bigger and bigger is so terrible, is because their audience is not becoming bigger. If anything, the audience is becoming smaller because the type of people who take drugs also give shit advice. So they cannot help naturals grow. So their natural audience gets smaller and smaller. They themselves get bigger and bigger through the drugs, which heightens the distance and creates more severe body dysmorphia because you're looking up again to someone that you can never hope to reach, that you can never hope to achieve in terms of physiques. And good point by Geoffrey again. He said that in the 40s, the physiques were amazing, right? From Jacques Lalanne and all of these guys, the natural bodybuilders who didn't have access to steroids. And that if you wanted good standards, you could look up to them. But it made me think of something else, a point he didn't make. Do you believe that people back in the days, if they have had access to social media, and those guys would have been influencers, do you believe that body dysmorphia would have been a thing? I don't think so. Why? Because even though those guys were massive and jacked, they were still realistic and close enough to what a normal human looks like. So it wouldn't have been as bad. We are the generation to deal with really aggravated body dysmorphia is because of that distance. So again, even though the time machine possibility is not available to you, you could just shift your focus. Instead of looking at these top pros, why don't you look in the past? Look at the guys that were actually natural. Those are better role models if you wish to select some. That should reduce your body dysmorphia to a great extent. Because these guys were humans. They were sublimed humans. They took their physique to the next level, but they still look like you and me, just bigger. The problem with bodybuilders nowadays is that they don't look humans anymore. And I don't say that to be mean or anything, but they're freaks. They're mass monsters. A human cannot look like that naturally. It's impossible. If you could, again, plug one of these dudes in a time machine, if you can even make them fit, and beam them back 100 years ago and show them to people, I do think that most people would think that they are demigods or creatures, like Frankenstein creatures. No one would believe that they're actual normal humans because they're not. The amount of drugs that they're taking has made them transcend humanity, right? They left humanity behind, per se. But the price they're going to have to pay is also inhumanly high. The issue is that regardless of that price, you're still being exposed to their physique, a physique that you cannot achieve, so it makes your body dysmorphia much worse. And a funny thing from his video too, Geoff talked about the toys. It's something I never even thought about, but when he said it, I realized he was correct. Even toys have had their physique inflation, because in reality, the physique standard is across the board. It's for the movie industry, the toy industry, the bodybuilding industry, whatever you can think of, because bigger is better. So everything is getting bigger with time. Even the toys we give our kids in reality have an impact on their body dysmorphia, because we give them impossible standards to fulfill. Standards that were realistic and natural in the 40s, which does not mean that they were low or defeatist in any way, shape, or form. They were just human, so they made sense, and your brain could cope. You could see Jacques Lalanne, again, a guy I made a video about recently, and think, wow, he's massive, he is ripped, and he has big muscles, but I can see myself looking like this, because he looks like me, but bigger. Nowadays, that transposition is not possible anymore. So what used to be a healthy mental practice of inspiration is now becoming your worst enemy, because that inspiration doesn't work. Your brain refuses to let you believe you can look like one of these guys or one of these new toys that are being sold to kids. And this is what I believe to be the main difference between BDD and male power fantasies. A point that Job didn't make, because maybe it's not part of the logic of the video he wanted to present, but one that I find interesting, because when he presented the toys and he showed like Batman, for example, with massive biceps, saying that it was impossible to reach, or was it Superman? I think it was Superman. I thought to myself, maybe I disagree with that. Maybe there's a problem in that type of reasoning practices, because now you're attacking male power fantasies, which are an important part of being a male in this day and age. But then I realized one thing. The difference between BDD fuel and male power fantasy is very slim. Meaning that you can have the same model, the same physique, and that physique could be BDD inducing or it could be inspiring based on one criteria and one criteria only. How connected you are with that physique and how deluded you are in your ability to achieve it. Meaning that I believe that if I show you, for example, a manga character that's massive and you understand that you will never look like that, but you just take the motivation it gives you, then it's safe and it's a male power fantasy. But the moment you start becoming deluded and you think that you could potentially look like that naturally, that's when it becomes a problem. And I think that the reason why it's becoming worse and worse is because back then, with those silver era bodybuilders, the amount of power they had on people's minds was greatly reduced. And also, most people never even came close to believing that there could be an age where drugs could make people grow bigger. Nowadays, it's in reality common. Everyone knows it. Everyone has knowledge about steroids. So this is the reason why BDD is so prevalent. Because when you see a big physique, you have the doubt put in your head. Is he natural? Is he not natural? And whether you can answer that question or not doesn't really matter because there is no answer. At the end of the day, you're now going to have a disconnected relationship with that physique. So that physique cannot inspire you anymore. It can only bring despair. Because I believe that fantasies do make you better as long as you're not deluded, but most people are. Because they have no idea what is achievable naturally anymore. That's also what was so great back in the days. Hey, there's no drugs, no one knows about steroids. So if I see a guy who's big, I can still tell myself, hey, I can get like this, I can look like him. And you know what's so interesting? Back then, they didn't talk so much about genetics. They didn't really care about it. Isn't it interesting that all of that talk about genetics is prevalent now with steroids that in reality are injectable genetics? I think it's because the two come hand in hand. The people who speak the most about genetics are people who take drugs. You know why? Because they're finding ways to justify their physiques. Instead of having to face the fact that it's from the drugs, they like to invent a reason that is intrinsically linked to who they are, meaning that it's one of their genetic traits. Because for some reason, they believe that it's better to claim that they were just born with a gift rather than to say that they're big off of the juice. And all of that was non-existent back then, but it's something that we have to deal with. And this leads to you most likely having no real idea of what you can look like. It leads to 50% of people having delusions of grandeur where they think that they're going to look like their favorite IFBB pro naturally if they just eat rice and broccoli, which will never happen. And then you have the portion of the population, the other 50%, that thinks that having any amount of muscle on your frame is impossible and that you will be small for the rest of your life. You have the useful idiots on one hand and you have the black pill crowd on the other hand. And interestingly enough, the two are interchangeable because I do believe that there is a lot of mobility between those two populations. A lot of people who are completely deluded and completely blue-pilled, once they realize the reality, instead of becoming red-pilled, they become black-pilled. They just give up. And once you're black-pilled, you're black-pilled for life. So it's the two ends of the spectrum are terrible. But I understand also that these people end up in these categories because of their body dysmorphia. And this is for one reason. Instead of getting the work done and training, they are hoping. They're in a constant state of scheming. They're thinking about, in 1 year I will look like this if I do this, and that guy looks like this, so I will be able to look like him. All of that really is transferring the onus of the work onto their body dysmorphia because they are robbing themselves of the ability to be active. They are passive spectators of their life. They never get anything done. And that's the big issue with BDD as a whole. It paralyzes you. You don't want to train anymore because you're small and you'll be small forever. So what's the point? Or you'll think, okay, I need to get bigger. So you'll train way too much and you'll completely shoot your recovery in the foot. And now you're injured or you're just incapable of working out for the rest of the week. all of which is not conducive to getting bigger over time. But all of that is created by the anguish in your head, that constant voice that is telling you, hey, you're not good enough, you're not good enough. And in 1 year, if you're still like this, you will not be good enough. All of that is thinking. You spend too much time up here. And guess where the body dysmorphia lives? In your brain. The only way to shut down that voice and to get back on the right path is to stop thinking so much about all of these inflated standards and just get down to it. Who knows what you'll look like? Who cares? Just work. Do you think that the guys from the 40s had like reunions where they discussed and they thought, do you think I'm going to get 19 inches arms? No, they just did it and then they got it. And this is the best way to actually get rid of all of that psychological warfare that we're being attacked with nowadays. But it's very complicated because you are, in a sense, put in that state by influencers themselves, because they play off of that mindset of constant hope to sell you products. Instead of telling you to work hard, they tell you, hey, if you buy my program or if you buy my product, I am going to make you big. So there is a spot, there is a place in your head where you're waiting for someone to save you, and they just jump in, they lunge in. But you know what's so ironical and disgusting about it? They're the ones who created the need in the first place. Their existence created body dysmorphia in your head, and now they swoop in to save you from it. They're the culprits. They're the ones who did that to you, but you're going to accept that hand because you don't understand, again, that body dysmorphia, the greatest point in Geoff's video, in my opinion, is not born in a vacuum. Someone did that to you, and that someone is those influencers on drugs. So they leverage your body dysmorphia disorder to sell you things, and this has turned into a mass hysteria of sorts where everyone is inflicted, so it becomes harder and harder to actually see that you have a problem. Because when body dysmorphia was starting to get discussed on the platform, many people were awakening to it and thinking, I actually have that. I resonate with that. This is how I feel. And it shows one thing. It shows that for these people, they had started to believe that either it was normal to feel that way, or they were starting to feel shameful because they thought they were the abnormal ones. But I am here to tell you, brother, that the way you feel is perfectly normal. Having days where you feel like shit is perfectly normal. I have days where I look myself in the mirror and I think, man, I am small. Why am I wasting my time? I am tiny. It's just a waste of energy. These days come and go. Sometimes they're really bad, sometimes they're just okay. It never really goes away. But I'm doing my best to get rid of it because I understand that it's non-productive and that the more I get rid of it, the more I can show you how to, and the less hysterical the entire group is going to be. Because the group has truly normalized that mental illness. As I said, it's also to the benefit of those big fitness pages that want you to stay afflicted by BDD because it gives them leverages to sell you products to a point where you end up not even being able to free yourself from that influence because you're too attached to the person. But that's the discussion about fanboyism I already had in the past. But that leads also to you not trying to fight it anymore. So you just give up. And yet, the anguish is still here. It's the issue with all of that, all of those fetishes attached to mental illnesses, all of these groups trying to present it as normal, who are trying to say that having mental problems doesn't make you a bad person. They're right. But the problem is that the way they go about it is terrible because instead of trying to remove the stigma from the person afflicted, they remove the stigma from the illness itself. And that leads to people starting to believe that they don't really have to fix it because if there is no problem, why fix anything, right? Well, there is a problem. You need to know that there is a problem, and you know that there is a problem because you feel bad. If you felt okay, there would be no problem. As long as that pain and that stress is still there, then you know that your body dysmorphia is also still there. And for the people who are pushing that onto us, those big pages, I also want to share a word of empathy, because they are not just the culprit. As I said at the start, they're also the victim. Someone did that to them. At some point or the other, their body dysmorphia was triggered by someone, and they are still in a state of body dysmorphia. This is something that I have noticed with time, and I came to understand. I started thinking that they were just evil and they were just using that thing to sell things to people. But then I realized that they couldn't help it, because it's the only way they can cope. Since they themselves are afflicted, they don't really understand what they're doing. They're just doing what they know works with them. They are just projecting the way they feel onto you, and since you also have body dysmorphia, it works. But here, since their body dysmorphia is so massive because of the steroid use, well, their power of projection is also massive because they have more experience, right? They're dragging you into their territory and they're beating you with experience. All of these guys you watch, all of the juice heads who are massive year round, you wouldn't believe the state of their body dysmorphia. The time they spend in front of the mirror, the time they spend thinking, man, I'm small, I need to up the dose. All of them die from it, right? All of the deaths that you've seen in the past few months are people who are just like that. They knew they were going to die. Their doctors told them they were going to die. They intimately knew that they were going to die, and yet they still took the drug that killed them. They refused to downsize. They refused to stop the drugs, because between death and losing their size, they picked death. This is how severe BDD can get. It can get you to a point where you lose sight of the most important thing, which is your life, right? Understand, your life, survival, and the will to survive, the will to power, is the most important part of who you are as a person. When you lose it, it's over. It's the worst ailment you can get, because it leads to death. Once you lose sight of the preservation of your own life, you lose sight of everything else. You cannot make sense of anything anymore. And these people are, yes, to blame for what they do to the community, but they are also, in a sense, people that you need to not necessarily respect or even comprehend, but pity. That is the word. We need to pity them, because they are sadly maybe too far gone. Maybe they can't be saved anymore. They took drugs for too long. But I know that you can be saved, because you haven't touched drugs yet. So there is a chance for you to come back, right? To return. They might be too far gone the tunnel, and at the end of the tunnel is death. All of that because of body dysmorphia. All of that because of a tiny voice in your head that started just telling you that you were a little bit too small, and that then skyrockets out of control. Because when you start hating the body you're in, and you're constantly being made aware of the fact that you don't feel at home in your own carcass, it is sometimes impossible to even carry on with life anymore. And that's why they're so contagious as well. To save you and to save them also, you must unfollow them. Geoff made that point as well. It might sound cruel, but it's the best thing you can do. If you actually have a big bodybuilder or fitness channel that takes drugs, and you like them and you want them to survive, the best thing you can do is unfollow them. Because the reason why they continue taking the drugs is also because of social media. Just like you were infected by BDD because of social media, they are kept contagious and are kept very sick by their audience, because they know that if they lose size, they will lose their audience. So the only way to save them is for people to leave before they lose the size, to make them realize, hey, this is a wake-up call. You need to stop those dangerous practices and you need to take control of your life. We will not be showing you any amount of support if you continue on that path. This applies across the board. It's not just pro bodybuilders. It's in reality any enhanced athlete. It is something that I'm personally trying to do as well. I understand it's tough if you feel connected to some of them, but as I said, true empathy and true love for them would entail doing that. It would entail actually showing them a little bit of tough love. Because that contagion I just described, as I said, is interesting because Geoffrey described it in pathological terms. It is true that the carrier of the disease can be the contagious agent that is going to make the entire group sick, and it's even more pernicious than that because in the case of these guys with massive body dysmorphia, since the dysmorphia is so strong, the way they project it onto you is also very strong. And I didn't plan on doing that, but an example comes to mind and I have to use it. Greg Doucet. Doucet is a good example of that. I believe that his body dysmorphia is through the roof. And that explains his insane standards, but also explains the fact that his standards only really apply to what he describes as genetic elite or drug users, meaning that his problem, his mental problem, is so advanced that he cannot understand or comprehend the idea that you could get big or look aesthetic without any drugs. And so he massively projects that onto his audience, making them believe that they can never achieve anything without drugs, which blackpills them to a great extent and pushes them forward towards drug use. It is, in a sense, promoting drug use. And it comes from someone who, wouldn't you know it, is also on drugs. This is the contagion aspect I just described. His pathogens are so developed and strong that when he actually contaminates his audience with them, it's very severe right off the bat. Because some people like me have body dysmorphia. I have standards that are a tiny bit too high because of it, or out of whack, and could make you feel bad. Maybe even looking at my body makes you feel bad. But it's still, as I said, close enough to what a normal human looks like that it's not going to damage you in any way, shape, or form. He is the extreme, he and other people like him on this platform. Because the only way to avoid physical and spiritual death is to do so. It's to separate ourselves entirely from these individuals for our good and their good. Since we can escape BDD, it's truly possible. I had very bad BDD a few years ago and I've started to make massive progress by following the practices I shared in the video in the description. And to go back on the time machine metaphor, we cannot really go back to the times of the 40s. You can use them as examples, but at the end of the day, the environment around you is still modern YouTube fitness and modern social media. So we cannot spatially remove ourselves, but spiritually we can. We can take ourselves away. We cannot change the environment, at least for now. We're trying. People like Geoffrey and I and Alpha Destiny are trying to change the environment and change this platform for the better. But we're fighting against forces that have more means and more influence than we have. So the only thing we can do right now is to change the mind of the people who watch us now, hoping that it spreads. Because if contagion, BDD contagion can spread, then I believe that the cure can also spread as well. The immunity, the herd immunity can spread as well, but it's going to be up to us, up to you and up to I. And I'm going to finish with a quote from Geoff's video, one that I liked particularly well, where he says, "Fuck the standards." And I stand behind that 100%. Fuck the standards. The standards are what caused you to have BDD in the first place. The standards is what is keeping BDD alive in your brain. If you say fuck the standards, you say fuck the BDD. You do not need standards. The only thing you need is your own body, your own mind, knowledge, and constant progression. The wind agrees, it blows for change. Thank you for watching. Have a good day.